Yes.
Yes,
That's
okay.
good.
So, with other words, the Unity Museum really basically envisions the oneness of humanity. It's very simple. It's pretty straightforward, and looking at the global community, it was no time at all that one of our Japanese college students says, because we are located across from the university, said, "Yeah, but what about the youth? What about us?" And so we very quickly launched Uniting Youth for World Peace. And so, therefore, today's presentation, I want to show an aspect of the Unity Museum that also focuses on youth for world peace around the world. Now, so who are we? First of all, we're a not-profit organization since 2011. Oh gosh, looking back now, here we are in 2024. So it's been a few years that we formally got our 501c3. The Unity Museum is a subsidiary of Uniting Hearts Networking Institute. And all of the, of course, donations are tax deductible. And we now, because we've grown not only in the US, but also overseas, when it's overseas, we let our local museums over there open their own bank accounts like we did in Cameroon. And everything we do, everything that we offer to the public is free. You notice at the bottom there, it has a clip, a YouTube clip, and it shows you it's a walking tour. It's a walking tour through the Unity Museum. So there you see our board members. You see that top left slide, an endless barrage of amazing people. And some of them, we have close-ups there. We are very diverse. We are white, we are native, we are Black, we are Latino. We are gay, we're transgender, we're straight. So if I put it in general terms, we really represent the focus of everybody. Now, so what do we offer? We offer rotating exhibits, presentations, and public discourse on local and global topics of relevance and historical significance to the advancement of civilization. So the museum services are free to the public, and visitors of all ages are welcome for tours and discourse. The Unity Museum also has outreach exhibits and presentations upon request in public venues such as libraries, civic centers, and schools. And here again, you have our website. Now, where did it all begin? It began back in 75 in Hawaii. When I began to reach out into the world, I became behind 69 on the Big Island, Kealakekua, Hawaii, Little Grass Shack. You might have heard that song. And I sort of slowly woke up by 75 that I wanted to do something to reach out into the world. So what I did, I thought, I know what, I decided to make a history calendar. So for the next 20 years, I started to send them around the world, thousands of them, tens of thousands. In fact, the wife of Shogi Effendi, the Guardian's wife, requested 5,000 at one time to distribute them in Africa. So I know they went many, many places. So this also included then a historical walking tour in my home. We had one of those high ceiling homes and had a huge wall. And outside on our lanai, we would have firesides, with 100 some people in there. But on that big wall, I started my first, what I call Unity Museum. There were miniature boxes, 6 of them. One for the Bab, one for Baha'u'llah, and so on. 6 of them, heroes and heroines around the world. And when the guests would enter, I would take him past now what I call the Miniature History Museum, and I'd give them a tour. And then they would walk through the living room. They would go out, and we had 3 barbecues, and we ate and were married, and they had amazing firesides. So, then let me just move my picture. I don't. It's so we visit. Okay. Da, 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 da. This included also in 1992, the Holy Year New York Congress. And then I also had the bounty of going to Haifa in 92 for the Holy Year and witnessed then the laying of
Hey,
the scrolls.
Sabina,
Yes.
we cannot see you anymore. You're not on the screen.
Okay, maybe that's a good thing.
Okay.
All right. So here, yeah, here you see the barrage of many history calendars, right? And as I said, they just sort of literally went around the world. Well, finally, by 1993, so 75, 1993, 18 years later, we moved, JT and I moved to Florida. And so we arrived there in 93, so right after the Holy Year, so to speak. But that same year, I went down to the Florida Baha'i Historical Society to find out that they had a huge 3-day festival with thousands of visitors, literally tens of thousands, 30-some thousand visitors, sponsored by Bank of America and Chamber of Commerce, called Pioneer Days. So we entered and registered there formally and officially as the Florida Baha'i Historical Society. Well, much to our surprise, there were all these 15 different historical societies in Fort Lauderdale. And much to our surprise, we won 3 first prizes and 1 second prize for A, being the latest, most historic historical society, for having the most authentic booth, for being closest aligned to the theme, which was automobiles, trains, and airplanes. And I talked about Arthur B. Dodge and Martha the Train and automobile, Arthur Dodge. Anyway, so we won, and then we took our exhibit after we had the success with all these ribbons and awards. We then took it to the various summer schools and winter schools. And I remember when Jack McCann and Bob Harris came and were the speakers at one of the summer schools, and we had this huge, above the rest, a massive exhibit there. And Jack McCann looked at me and he said, Sabina, he said, we have so many things in our, what he would call underwear drawers, that we hide, and artifacts and little objects. And that's part of our own personal history, but we need to bring out our history. And this idea of having a historical society, or later on became known as a history museum, he said, it's a wonderful idea. And I wish every assembly, in the country would think about that. Well, and so we did take it to summer schools and winter schools. Well, here you are. This was our, in Fort Lauderdale, our exhibit. And you can see that, see many of the visitors to our booth. Once we got the award, we had almost 500-600 people come into our booth, and it was put up by our seniors there in Tamarack. And my God, they suddenly realized, but it was a corner booth, so they could come in one way and go out the other way. But they had to very quickly learn about the history in Florida at that time. And as you can see, we had lots of attention. And at the bottom right there, you see the team that was manning the booth. And then you see at the top, you'll see when we took our exhibit to the winter and summer schools, how we sort of laid it out and had those miniature boxes and photographs and objects, and took them to various feasts, and it sort of gives you an idea how we sort of moved around with it. Well, finally in 2001, so I'm going to rush through and then we're going to get to our presenters, okay? And this is not going to take very long, but so finally we arrived in Seattle. But as soon as I got here, the Association of Baha'i Studies had chosen Seattle to come to the convention center, and there were thousands of friends from around the world. And we had carried with us our museum exhibit and brought it into that venue. And then after that big event, We then again started to go to local feasts and conventions over here. However, at that time also, we realized that the Baha'i Studies conferences, we then took it to the one in LA, we took it to the one in Phoenix. So we began to sort of take it out into various cities across the country. But it wasn't really until 2012 that we decided that from being a historical society, which at that time was the Washington Baha'i Historical Society, and we're going to talk in a minute about how we took it then out of that into the interfaith condition. Then we suddenly began to, I got married to Peter Van Ness, the co-founder of the museum, and his own family, like several of our board members, actually, their families arrived in this country in the 17th century and became remarkable founding family members like Hamilton the Duel. You know, it was the Van Ness that handed the pistol and to the Van Buren duel in Hamilton. So there are a lot of other founders became actually historical lineage members, including Amy's family and several others. Anyway, so we then in 2012 we decided that we would have a physical location for the first time, and we moved into the Eastside Baha'i Center in Bellevue in Washington, the other side of the lake in Seattle, and for free for almost 2 years. Downstairs the foyer, upstairs was a Baha'i Center, and up above that was a Montessori school, and we were in the foyer. So there were three different entities inside the building owned by the Baha'i community. Well, within 2 years, but one of the things, as soon as we opened our door, we noticed immediately that Bellevue Community College, Edmonds Community College, found out that there was a new museum, and they began to, the cultural anthropology class students began to show up for credit and studied at our museum. And we did that we've been doing that ever since. But we just had two colleges in the beginning, and we had as many as 30, 40 students at that time. And they would interview, then we make presentations. They had a big auditorium there that said hundreds of people, and the students would interview the various community members there. And it became a bigger thing where then we would take our exhibits into the colleges. So we went into Edmonds Community College with our exhibits and a variety of other opportunities. Well, so then by 2014, we decided that we needed to move outside of the Baha'i Center and moved onto across from the University of Washington, 72,000 students from around the world. And just a year ago, opened light rail behind us, which lets out 17,000 visitors a day. And so we went on to the Ave, and we then began to welcome a year 3,000 to 4,000 walk-in visitors, which became remarkable, and we still are there. So then it's now been a little over a decade, and let me know. So how do you start a Unity Museum? So how do you start one? Okay, so we're all about what uplifting humanity by celebrating the history of human progress towards unity, social justice, and global peace in your neighborhood. So what does it take? Well, it's pretty, and how do you apply, right? So any of you here, whether you're in Denmark, in Britain, in Cyprus, or so on, so you decide that you would look at the history of Cyprus, or if you're in London, in the neighborhood where you are, and that means general history. And Lorna will talk about it in a minute, what she did in Buffalo, right? So the local history. And then we also look at the meditative or the spiritual side of the community. So so you send us your bio and a picture, and then our webmaster will add you to our other locations on our unitymuseum.org site. And we also recommend that you open your own Facebook page. So this is initial setup, right? You got oh, let me go next one here. So you got yourself, this is downstairs. This is the entrance to upstairs is a museum. And downstairs we have a little table with a threefold. And this is exhibit was for February Black History Month, right? And you notice we have handouts, we have a trifold, we have a tablecloth, and some brochures on in this case, on the topic of race, right? Now, then when you get a little more sophisticated, you get a gazebo and you bring in objects, and we're about to do this a third weekend on the Ave in Seattle, which will have what, about 40,000 visitors coming through, may even be more because we have light rail now. We have no idea what our attendance is, but then we put the trifold in the back of the museum, and the front we have cookies and dark biscuits and ice water and coffee and 4 chairs, and our visitors come in, little carpet and flowers, and we begin to have our conversations. Then one of the things we do is, okay, I want to make sure that we fully understand it. Our unit museum is not a religious affiliation. So it is correct to share that we started a project in 2012 doing a celebration remembering the Western tour of the son of the founder Baha'u'llah in 1912. However, it became necessary to make a clear distinction between being a Baha'i direct project to be a Baha'i inspired by its social principles, or a more focusing on interfaith collaboration. Our board of directors is a professional collection of a variety of faiths, race, gender identities, and so on. Look at our website and you'll see that. And so some of our locations, such as Portland and Cameroon, have actually added an advisory board, which is very cool. So speaking then of religion, so you'll see here, this is our meditation room. And in there we have, remember then Christianity and Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and we have an extensive, almost 3,000 books on the various religions for study by our students on interfaith. Now, so we offered internships since the beginning. We have students from surrounding universities, colleges, and high schools. They're all 4-credit courses. So we work with each student's curricula and approved by the faculty or teacher. Often the students come back quarter after quarter, which is that happens. And many of our students are from around the world. Some colleges even have flown in whole classes, like from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We were shocked one day, and we had Fanana Pazir visiting there, Dr. Fanana Pazir. And fortunately, he was there. And suddenly, because we had given courses in the college in Chapel Hill, the class decided to go on a tour, and they remembered our museum, and they suddenly showed up. And we gave them, I think, our first high school presentation that was unannounced, literally showing up. And it was just great, and it was fun, and we all really enjoyed it. So anyway, and if you look at our YouTube channel, you will find that how interviews with lots of different students and see what they have to say. So what are some of the tools that we offer you? Because you say, okay, I get the table, I get the 3-fold tablecloth and handout, or maybe later, later maybe a gazebo, right? Let me just bring this up a little bit here. But we're also here, this is how we help you. So we offer our own website, and then we have other locations, and that's where you go, and that's where your story is and your events are. And you will okay, and we list you there. So you have access to list of all of your events and exhibit opportunities. You can be part of our weekly newsletter and list events or collaborations. And by the way, this newsletter goes to goes to anybody that is listed and visitors from around the world out of our guest book. And for the Baha'i community here, to let you know, it goes to our national, goes to the House of Justice, to some of the regional Baha'i councils, local assemblies, and so on. So that they every other Friday we've gone over to bi-weekly newsletter. So you will have full access to our YouTube live channel that will be recording your event. This can be shared with other communities with the link. You can offer courses in our, wait until you get to this one, in our School of Global Peace Studies, virtual reality building. We are part of Decentraland University with many added great opportunities, and we have our own Zoom program for you to use. Okay. We offer virtual tours and have recorded tours for our students. Okay, now let me just go back to hold your questions for a second, because I know you have questions. And okay, what am I doing? Okay, need to go to here we go. Now, one of the things we're encouraging our executive directors on the other locations is to take a course, because we all have different religious affiliations, right? And the one thing we have in common is our human rights, the 30 articles of human rights. Our table downstairs, our exhibits center often and most of the time around the Day of Human Rights for Women, for freedom of religion and so on. So I have become a certified human rights education training consultant. And just about all of our executive directors, we're asking them to take the course and become a certified human rights consultant that has been extremely effective in Africa, to just mention a few. And so then here we have our interfaith collaboration, and this is and I'm at my end here, so we're gonna get ready any minute now. But you see this breathtaking building at the top left? It's a 2-story U-shaped building, 2 floors. That is our School for Global Peace Studies in Decentraland. Carl will talk about that. On the right is an entrance to our museum inside the convention center there. And at the bottom, you see a couple of our exhibits in the museum over there. Now, let me see. This brings me to the end of the slideshow. And how am I going to get back now? Okay, hang on just a second. Okay. And let's see, we don't need stop screen sharing. Stop. I'm almost there, folks. I'm almost there. Let's see. And let me see. Okay. How's that? Are we there? Now, what we're going to do now.
You have to turn on your video again.
I know. And here we are. Okay. So now what I like to do is Lorna. Lorna was the first one. Lorna served in Haifa for many, many years. I'm just going to introduce you quickly. And worked with Dr. Arbab and went around the world, was a pioneer in China, and visited us at the museum. And when was that, Lorna? A couple of years ago? I forget how long ago. 2 years ago. Oh my God. So take it away, girl.
Yes, my name is Lorna Bergner, and I'm currently living in Buffalo, New York. I met Sabine 2 years ago, exactly. I visited her in her home and at the Unity Museum. At the time, I was not thinking of myself doing anything like she's been doing for the past several years, but I was certainly impressed with the work that she's been doing and inspired by what she's doing. It happens that when I arrived, I've lived overseas most of my adult life, places like Central America, the Caribbean, Israel, and China. So I've only recently started making my home here in the Buffalo, New York area. And when I arrived here in 2019, I was actually invited to continue the research work that had been begun, and I think mainly by Steve Collins, who's with us today, and others, to further research the visit of Abdu'l-Baha to Buffalo in 1912. And I need to say, I think that history was never my forte, although I love learning about people and their contribution to society. So I was very eager to continue this research or participate with others in this research about the visit of Abdu'l-Baha and his contribution to world peace during his travels in North America, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith. So when I went to see Sabine just 2 years ago, and the concept that was so impressive to me was this idea of studying history, not just the contribution of one person or looking at one event, but looking at the contribution of all people, how we interact with each other from our different backgrounds. So when I came back to Buffalo after spending some time in the Seattle area, that's when I said, you know what? I think I can have a Unity Museum too, because I like the idea of looking at the past, trying to highlight the contributions of all people who has contributed to the progress here of Buffalo, made Buffalo what it is today. Not just one person, but groups of people, many individuals from all different backgrounds working together. Maybe they weren't aware that they were working together, but everyone has made a contribution historically to where Buffalo is today. My first exhibit was a public exhibit at a public meeting, and our keynote speaker was one of the leaders of our Haudenosaunee Nation here in the Buffalo area. I won't go into the detail of our history, but this is a very important aspect of the development of the Buffalo area when the lands were taken away from the Haudenosaunee people. So I was highlighting in my exhibit, I have a traveling exhibit, which I can put together on various themes. And so my theme at that time was to show the contribution of various peoples, groups of peoples, to the development of Buffalo. So the Haudenosaunee people were highlighted in my exhibit. The German population who first settled and were responsible for great industries here, and the Irish people, to some extent Chinese, very small number, and of course the African Americans. The conversation that I had with the gentleman from the Haudenosaunee Nation, he reinforced my commitment that any of our exhibits don't tell the whole story, but that if we can engage people in conversation, then we see all the different sides of the one story, but from different viewpoints. And he was quite intrigued with that, my approach of highlighting the history of Buffalo, and said, I'm going to take this to my people. I think we need to do this too. So I started to realize right away how people are interested in history when it's presented in this way, where we show how all people, no matter what their backgrounds are, make a contribution to the progress of civilization. So my focus here, of course, is on Buffalo, but always with a global perspective and the issues that are confronting mankind, because Buffalo is integrated with all the cities of this country, and this country with all the countries around the world. So we're each making our contribution, each in our own unique way. And I think the importance of documenting and telling the story of our history is very important. And I've found that this is a wonderful way for me, because I'm relatively new to the Buffalo area, but I have become greatly intrigued in learning Buffalo's history. It's a wonderful way to meet people and share our ideas about how people come together and learn to collaborate with each other for the progress of our families and our neighborhoods and our communities. I'm currently working on a series of exhibits that will highlight the role of religion in building community. And this one story in the early history of Buffalo was that there was a predominant in the 1800s, predominantly a German community and a predominantly Irish community. And the Irish people were mainly the workers, the dock workers, the iron and steel factory workers, and so on. Their social get-together places were the bars. And then at that same time, there was a small group of Polish people immigrating to the United States. And one of the priests who was here in Buffalo was noting that these Polish people didn't stay in Buffalo, and he wanted them to stay in Buffalo. And he said, how can I encourage the Polish people to stay in Buffalo? And he thought, well, maybe if I build a church. So he arranged for a large tract of land to be donated, and they built this beautiful cathedral called the St. Stanislaus Cathedral. It's one of the major architectural wonders in the United States, located here in Buffalo. And
Lorna, can you hear me, sweetie? I
yes,
know, and I wanted, and I've got 6 more people to talk a
I'm
little bit.
finishing right now. Yes,
And if you can, that would be cool. And then, by the way,
Yeah.
Maura, you're standing by for Portland next, okay? Thank you, Lorna. Go ahead, sweetie.
So so this wonderful cathedral was built, and it not only attracted the Polish immigrants to stay in this area, but it also provided one of the first places for the Irish people to come together and worship. And from that, wonderful communities were developed. So I'm intrigued with this idea of the impact that religion has, or lack of religion has, on the development of our community. So that's the focus of my next exhibit. Thank you, Sabine, for being such an inspiration to me. And thank you all for listening.
Oh, that was great, Lorna. Thank you. You really did a great job. So that was Buffalo. Maura, can you come in from Portland and put on your camera?
Yes, you can see me now, right?
No, not yet.
My camera's on. I can see me.
Jennifer, can we bring on Lorna? I mean,
No.
Maura? Maura Fox. There you go. We'll see you, honey.
So I am a retired teacher here in Portland, Oregon, and I taught 2nd and 3rd grade. So 3rd graders do the history of our city, Portland. So I spent a lot of years teaching about history. And then after I retired, I am also a member of the Baha'i Faith. And I joined the archives committee, took some archives classes. And I was interested in not just learning about history, but sharing that history. And then I visited Sabine, and she really opened up my eyes to a much larger picture rather than just focusing on the Baha'i faith history, to focus on the principles of the faith, but work in the outer community, more of the inspiration based on world unity and justice. So I opened my mind to that idea, And I decided I want to be also, I also want to have a Unity Museum. And so I'm just in the beginning stages of that effort. And what I really loved about the Unity Museum was the focus on positive contributions to unity and celebrating diversity and all the accomplishments that the human race has made towards this world unity. So I wanted to bring that to a local level. So I started with a building, which is actually our Baha'i Center in Portland, Oregon, which is on the list of historical, it's on a register of historical places, National Registry, because it used to be a post office. So my first poster is the history of this building. But in order to do the history of the building, I had to start with where the building is located, which happens to be on the confluence of the Willamette and Columbia Rivers, which is a sacred site for the Native people. So I had to start all the way back with the Native people of the area. It turns out that Lewis and Clark actually camped just below our building site. So, and they documented a village, a Native village that was right up the hill, which is right where our Baha'i Center building is. So I started with this history of the building, and then I went to the St. John's Historical Society, which is our neighborhood is St. John's in Portland. And turned out that they had a history of the neighborhood, but it was very white history. And they said, well, there really wasn't any diversity in St. John's. And I thought, that doesn't quite sound right. So I began to do some research, and I ended up from talking about the Native people before the building. I discovered that there was a Chinese laundry on the site before it was built to be a post office. Then it became a post office. I found the very first Black members of the post office staff. And then from there, looked in the neighborhood. I found, if you really just look at from a neighborhood and family perspective, I found a Chinese family that was very important to the neighborhood because they sold all the work clothes. This was a working neighborhood of blue collar workers. And this Chinese family, there were 3 generations of this family that sold all clothes to the workers. So that sent me to the Chinese Historical Museum here in Portland and the Japanese Historical Museum. And they weren't aware of the Japanese and Chinese families that were living in the neighborhood. They thought there were very few. But I've now documented that people moved from downtown to this neighborhood because of the racism in downtown. They moved to this neighborhood because it was cheaper. So even the historical societies didn't know this history. So that got really fascinating for me. So now I'm working with the Chinese Historical Society, the Japanese Historical Society, and the St. John's Historical Society. And I also discovered a woman from the early history of Portland. Her name was Beatrice Kennedy, and she was a racial justice advocate, very famous across the country. But turns out she also was a member of the Baha'i faith, and we didn't even know that. So I've kind of combined her. Turns out that she gave speeches in the St. John's neighborhood at churches. So then I found the history of that church. And then I'm just putting that all together into my first exhibit. We have a big parade in Portland. We have the Rose Festival parade, and there's actually several different parades, and one of them goes right through St. John's. So we're going to have our very first presentation, which is what Sabine was saying. We have our canopy, we have our little fold-up table, and we're now in the process of making one poster about the history of the Baha'i Center building, which used to be a post office. The whole history, starting from the Native Americans all the way through who the art installations that are in it, and all kinds of history about the people who worked in it. And then we're going to have a second one about this racial justice advocate, Beatrice Kennedy, because there is a giant 6-story tall painting of her 1 block from the Baha'i Center building. And we didn't know even she was a Baha'i, but they painted her on the building couple years ago, but nobody in St. John's really knows who she is. So we're gonna have a poster on that. And then we're now collaborating with the St. John's Historical Society to create a more diverse perspective of families and diversity in that neighborhood. We won't have that one done in time to put out our little booth for the parade, but we're hoping to share that later on. And we're inviting the St. John's Historical Society to join us in our presentation and share whatever other diverse history they have of the neighborhood. So we're just kind of in the beginning, and we're hoping to move on and collaborate more with other museums. We are not yet members of the human rights, what do you call it? The Human Rights Advocate Certificates. We haven't had our first board meeting yet, but we have like 4 members of our board, and we're just in the process of having our first meeting now that we have some ideas of what we're doing. That's about it for me.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really great, Amora. So now we're going to go over, and I'm just going to poke my head in there. Now we're going to go over to Dr. Amy Colbert. And we want to, she's going to share a little bit. Here we are on the university district on the Ave. And it didn't take very long that we realized that Seattle and our own neighborhood had a lot of history. And we're just now talking not just a whole neighborhood. Amy's going to talk about the street where we're on called the Ave. And without further delay, Dr. Colbert.
Okay, I'm Amy. Over the last 5 years, a group of us have been working on application from the state of Washington for being declared an historic district. The district will encompass just the University Way, which is we call the Ave. It's a main commercial street for around the university, and is the second largest commercial area in Seattle. We've got 83 buildings. Now, I said 5 years ago, right? That was of course interrupted by a certain virus, and so it's taken us a while.
So what makes the building historic is what you had to research.
Yeah, we've got 83 buildings. We have to look into the architecture and into their use, and 60% of them have to be contributing to create an historic district. Well, we just finished the preliminary application, and we should hear about it in June, whether it gets accepted or not. Now, the other project alongside this, and it's directly involves the
Keep on.
it directly involves the Unity Museum itself, is that we've got a lot of students that have been doing interviews of the people that have been on the Ave. And this I think will really liven up. You know, the architect is only interested in buildings and what they were used for. We have, for instance, the second Nordstrom built store in the world. We have the 5th Starbucks store in the world. Actually, the second one is right down the street here. And we have
Let me talk about the movie a little bit.
okay.
Yeah.
And we have things like Bruce Lee's dojo, but I'm going to turn over the spot here for.
Go there. Okay. Sorry, this is so basically what then happened. Got it, Amy?
Yep.
So basically what happened, so this is then the local history, right? So our students began to interview, and the street, it started all the way back in across the street from us. At the bottom of the bank is a piece of glass, and there's a river below it, and it's called Frog Pond. And we suddenly realized that literally our street is where the native lived and where they did their fishing. And so we began to consider making a movie. What makes our street historic? Because the Ave will become a historical street. And now we are in the middle of making a movie about that. But I don't want to take up too much time because we have others that we would like to share a little bit. And how about if we go over to Carl?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me and see me?
Not yet. I think she's about to find you and highlight you. There you are.
Hello. So my name is Carl Fravel. I've been a Baha'i since 1985. I met Zabina in 1990 or 1991, and we developed this idea of putting a Unity Museum in a virtual world so that people from anywhere in the world could visit it. And I want to share that facility so you can see it. If I share this screen, I think you'll be able to see.
Cool.
Yeah, let me move this
Cool, Carl.
little thing out of the way here.
Maybe.
This is the entrance to the Decentraland Conference Center, which is a large facility. It's a large conference center in the Decentraland virtual world. And right near the entrance to it, we went ahead and put the Unity Museum. And we, it's not about a geography of a particular place, but it's about the whole world, right? Because we have visitors from all over the world. And Zabina, you didn't know this, but I just looked today at the traffic history. We've had over 22,000 people land in the vicinity of or in this museum since it opened in July of 2019. 22,000. So there's several rooms in the museum. The first room, it's about we were inspired by the COVID pandemic to talk about various pandemics and epidemics and endemics in the world. So we have these histories of various diseases and who did what work to try to overcome them. And then in the second room, we have the history of various things that mankind has achieved in the areas of, transportation and sports. These are various things that have connected people with each other, humanitarian leaders, etc. I'm not going to go to every one, but upstairs we have a third exhibit, which is the thing which powerfully unites people is religion, and having a floor here for the perspective on and unity of religion. There were different world religions. Zabina, we don't have a poster for the Baha'i Faith. I think you might know that, but we probably ought to put one up since we are the sponsoring organization. But here's, for example, the Christians. So it gives basically a historical perspective on the religion, especially centered around the founder of the faith in each case. That's the Unity Museum, and I'm going to put into the chat some URLs that you might want to grab for future reference if you want to visit this place. So in our chat, I'm first of all
go over to the school.
I will. So the first thing I'm putting into the chat is the website of the conference center, and the second thing I'll put in here is the one moment. The URL of the museum itself. And you can visit the museum just using a browser. You don't need to install any special software. And then finally, we're going to go over and take a look at the School for Global Peace Studies that she showed in an earlier slide. That's also here in Decentraland. So let me do that here. This is not a Unity Museum per se, but it's along the same kind of mission, and that it's a School for Global Peace Studies within the context of the Decentraland University. District, which has many other campuses in it. But this building it's a beauty. marble with columns. And if you want to go through one of these doors, you can go into these lecture spaces that can present video presentations or talks. And there are upstairs and in the back of the building, there are classrooms and research facilities. So that's what I have to share. Any questions, Sabina, that you'd like me to answer?
Well, that was impressive about the number of visitors. You know, you just don't realize when you're out there, how this is virtual reality. I know Sweden is just asking. This is virtual reality and called Decentraland. And Kyle gave you that. And so our Unity Museum is there. And then our School for Global Peace Studies is there. And we're just innovating a video game within the theater called Piece by Piece to study peace, to study global peace. Thank you, Kyle. This is really great. I don't know what we would have done without you. I mean, that was sheer inspiration to you and I cross our lives, and that you then brought us into this world. So the next thing I'd like to ask, if we could highlight Dr. Perkins. Where do you think, Dr. Perkins, where now that we have been there forever on this little hole in the wall, upstairs, 27 stairs and rickety bags and walkers and of course strollers and wheelchairs cannot visit us. So we then met Dr. Perkins, and he joined our board of directors, and he says, "You got to be kidding me. I cannot make all these stairs. My back is killing me." Dr. Perkins, there you go.
I just found it incredible when I first visited the Unity Museum, and it was all coincidental. I met Cameron at a event with our Congresswoman speaking, and he was just so happened to have flyers and stuff, and he invited me, and I just fell in love with that place. It's so rich. But then it sort of like broke my heart to realize that because there are stairs, the current location creates a disparate treatment to people who are handicapped. The elderly, handicapped, the infirm, they can't access this public place because of those stairs. So I proposed to Zabina that we need to launch a capital campaign to get a building. And it's still a work in progress. It's an incremental approach, but I do believe that support can be drummed up to get the Unity Museum its own building and make it accessible for everybody, and not just those who are young and can get up those stairs, because those stairs are beautiful. And so basically that's it. And
well, Dr. Perkins, can you mention that some of the people that you have invited to come to the museum or made presentation, and I'm just thinking of Leonard, the executive director. Yes. Mention some of the people that you have been able to talk to about our museum and our mission.
Oh, I speak very highly of the Unity Museum when I'm out in the field, being in the community. And we were able to get Leonard Garfield to come and visit the place. Leonard Garfield is the executive director of MOHAT. MOHAT is the acronym for Museum of History and Industry in Seattle. It's in the Lake Union area, and it's a beautiful building. So I encourage anybody to Google MOHAT, Museum of History and Industry, and if you can go visit it, go visit it. You'll find it incredible. So now I'm speaking to a couple of other people right now to come and visit the Unity Museum and maybe give presentations. I was just at an event over the weekend. It was hosted by the Church of Scientology here in Seattle. And they're a great church. They do a lot of good. And I'm not a Scientologist, but when I get invitations to go speak somewhere by reputable organizations, I go there and they had a guest speaker, this gentleman who's an African American, and he's a special agent with the Department of DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, a United States government. He's a special agent, and they created a new position for several of their agents. It's called community outreach. His whole presentation was on this awful fentanyl crisis that's destroying a lot of people's lives in Seattle and around the world. It was outstanding. So I gave him my card. He said if I invited him to the Unity Museum, we need to reach out to him and schedule it in. That's a good plus. There's a couple of other people that I'm asking to come in, and one of them is this couple. The lady's a businesswoman. Her husband is a construction contractor. He deals with real estate, buildings, and also I'm working on getting them a letter out also to come and visit. And maybe we can partner with her husband and these developers to get a building. And I know it's going to be a challenge because we want to keep the Unity Museum in the University District. I think it wants to stay in place. So those are just some of the options. That's a work in progress. We got a little delayed because I had gotten ill.
Sorry, I'm
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
sorry, I'm
That was
on a
really-
Zoom call right now. Could I call? It's okay. Could I
Okay.
call you back a little later? You're at home?
Could somebody
Okay.
mute themselves,
Okay.
please?
Bye-bye.
Anyway, Dr. Perkins, thank you very much. And I'm just so excited to have you on our board of directors. And your own journey has been remarkable because your father was a victim of police brutality and being a Black man shot by a white cop. And that case made it nationally around the world. And that's one of the areas of social justice that we represent at the Unity Museum. And so we're diverse, and I'm so grateful, that you made it onto our talk this morning. So I want to just ask, sorry.
Your father's case was Congressman Louis Stokes' first civil rights case back in 1959. And so I have been championing social justice and civil rights and human rights all my life. We were college activists back in the 70s. We marched on Washington. We championed for, I even later championed with the people in wheelchairs by the 90s, by the 80s, as they were struggling to get the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in Pittsburgh. So I was doing a lot of community work for the different foundations, going into these different organizations. And I just joined with people in wheelchairs because now whenever I get on the bus, I'm proud to see that handicapped people have access to public transportation. Handicapped people have access where they don't have to be mushroomed into their apartment buildings all day long or houses because the sidewalks, the curbs were so huge they couldn't get up and down on the curbs. Now the curbs are made flattened so people with disabilities can scroll their wheelchairs. So we can initiate change, but the way we initiate change, it has to be a collective endeavor.
That's right.
And there's so many different groups that are working on human rights, whatever, but we're so fragmented. And
what I want to add to that, Dr. Perkins, exactly what you're saying. We are also a member of the University District Council. And we had the other day their speaker, and he is the head of the food bank. And that's another hunger, right? Hunger and homelessness in the community. And because our Unity Museum offers a cup of coffee, some knitted caps, and a moment for quiet and peace, that we really try to service all of our bypassers and folks that are in the neighborhood, and homelessness and disability and diversity, transgender and the gay issue. These are all very important issues that are very relevant, certainly in Seattle. And so I thank you, Dr. Perkins. I want to just add one thing. When you brought in Leonard from the Mohi Museum, we walked around the museum and we came into the meditation room, and he was a little startled and taken back. You know, why did we have a meditation room? And I said, and he said, how long have we had that in a museum? Because separation of church and state, you know, museums are education. We don't really get into meditation. And he said, how long have you had? And I told him we've had it for 12 years. And he was very startled. He said, you mean to say this museum always had a meditation room? I said, yes. And he said, why? And I told him that it's only out of meditation that innovation, invention, and all exploration, all of that really starts with meditation. And unbeknownst to me, he said to me, he said, you know, we're a member of the state, national, and international. Oh, here comes, okay, we just got, Rwanda just came in. Okay, so we just had, he said that the International Alliance of Museums, for the first time, is discussing whether they should add meditation into the museums. And he recommended that maybe we interview the Unity Museum for having had this idea of a meditation room for 12 years already. So we've been on the leading edge for some time. Plus, when we went to that way back when, ABS, when they had the International Alliance Museums meet in Seattle, our museum was there, and there were hundreds and hundreds of museum executives from around the world: Smithsonian Museum, British Museum, Dubai Museum, Moha, and everybody, including us. And I happened to stand next to the lady who's the secretary, it's out of the UK. And it said next to her, and she asked who I was, and I told her Unity Museum, and she said that who are we? And I said, you know, here we're this tiny place, and there you've got the British Museum. I felt a bit intimidated. And I said to her, well, you know, we are a boutique museum. And she said to me, I never heard of such a thing. This is a 125-year organization. I never heard of a boutique museum. I said, I know, I just made it up because that's what we are. And she said, that's a very curious idea. Do you mind if I take it back to the International Alliance of Museums? I said, by all means. The next day, I'm in the vendor hall, and this lady comes running over and looking for me. And I thought, my God, I know the face. I don't have a clue who she is. And she comes closer and she said, are you Mrs. Van Ness? And I said, yes. She said, well, I'm the executive director. Listen to the idea. I'm the executive director for the Houston NASA Museum. And I said, oh, you're the one that got the outstanding award this year. That's how I knew the face, right? She said, yeah. And I said, well, how can I help you? She says, I understand you're the inventor of the idea of a boutique museum. I'm going, now I'm standing straight. I say, yes, I am. I was that moment, right? And she said, you know, we're having a problem with NASA. We don't have enough female astronauts. Remember, that was 6-7 years ago. She said, we don't have enough female astronauts. But if we take your idea, get it? If we take your ideas and make little boutique museums across the US, maybe we can attract more females to become astronauts. I'm not taking any credit for this, but you notice we've got a whole lot more female astronauts lately. I'm just saying, when the idea is right, no matter where and how you touch people's lives, the idea is taken up. So thank you, Dr. Perkins. And I like to bring in now Ladislav from Rwanda. Are you there, Ladislav? And can you bring up the camera? So let's see. We're waiting. Okay, are you visible on camera? And if
Yes,
so,
I am.
Jennifer, can you
I'm trying,
find
I'm
him?
trying it. Sorry, somehow
Oh,
it's not.
Take your time, honey. Take your time.
Okay,
There
there
we
we go.
are. Oh my God.
Yes.
Hello, sweetheart. So good to see you. Rwanda,
Me too,
go.
thank you. I'm really glad to see you.
So tell us how you and I began.
Again?
Tell them here how you and I began. How did we meet, and how did you become part of the family?
Okay, thank you very much. I think first of all, I would like to thank you all the team for welcoming me on this meeting. So how I became part of the team is I first received an invitation from my friend Ernest, and he told me there is a platform I would like you to join, and which was talking about human rights, as we are teaching and more educating about human rights here in Rwanda in schools, specifically young under 20 up to 12. And I remember the first day I was wrong with the time. When I entered, I met Zabine, and she told me, "Oh, the meeting will take place tomorrow." And I remember we had a long discussion. We chatted, and we shared information. She shared me what you do and how you do it, about the museum, and I shared with her about our activities here in Rwanda, how we do with the kids, how we do with the school, how we do with the school leaders, and finally, I think it went on, and we kept communicating, we kept chatting via Facebook, via WhatsApp, and we used to share with Zabine different photos or pictures of our daily
Talk about
activities.
Soccer for Peace. Talk about Soccer for Peace.
The Soccer of Peace is a kind of game that after educating children about human rights, our last activity during the annual activity is just a Soccer for Peace. A Soccer for Peace is a platform, let me say that, which brings students from like 50. Today we have 70 second school where we start a football, not for the sake of just playing, but also for educating and focusing, strengthening the unity, the friendship, the relationship, respect. So before we play, we have to take like 10 minutes when we say, okay, we are going to play, but the purpose is not just playing, but this is what we wanted to achieve through this football. So we talk about topics like peace building, the role of football in peace building. We talk about respect, because you can't play football in the same team when there is no respect. There is a mutual understanding, so you can't play together when you don't have that mutual understanding. So it's a Soccer for Peace, which started in 2004, and yet today is still going. I think this year it started on the 2nd March, and it will be closed on 23rd June. So hope if you were here in Rwanda or wherever, I would like to invite you to be part, but we will share it on our
One day,
on our
Ladisla.
Facebook or WhatsApp.
Ladisla, how many students do you run through a month? Do you talk about human rights and peace? Hundreds.
Yeah, for example, this second term of school here in Rwanda, which started in January 15th, we have now met 5,575 students.
Imagine that. It's amazing. It's amazing, the work, and I'm so proud that we are able to collaborate with you, and I love the idea. And you know, at least we get to see each other like this, and hopefully one year in person, right? So Ladisla, thank you ever so much for coming in and sharing your story, because here our visitors are from Europe, from Africa, from really many, many parts of the world, Canada, United States, and so on. So I am sorry to hear that. Peter, by any chance, are you audio capable at this point in the middle of the storm, or not yet? Okay, I guess not yet. So let me then, and I'm really sorry that Peter is having such problem. Let me ask by any chance. Okay, Burton, come on, there you go. Burton, come on and tell us about, um, yeah, Michigan.
Zabina, may I have to get
Yeah.
ready for a meeting at 12 o'clock, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
have
yeah.
to.
No, just feel free to go anytime. Right. So we are
It was
recording
wonderful.
this.
Thanks for inviting me to be a part. Okay, I'll see
Okay.
the recording later. Take
You
care,
bet. You
everybody. Good
betcha.
luck.
Okay. Great, Dr. Burton, Dr. Smith. So tell us about. Tell us. Talk to us.
Well, it says I hadn't really planned on having
It's
anything to
okay.
speak
Just sort
about,
of
but
breeze in.
right, I get what you're saying. Welcome everybody. Thank you, Zabina, for I said the invitation. The work I'm doing here in Michigan, particularly, is involving making the invisible parts of history visible again. A lot of it has to do with operating, as said, with the well-known figures, it says, that have this has been in Michigan when they were younger, or as part of, it says, their participation in Baha'i faith as long ago as it says 1911 and 1912, when Abdul Baha first came to America. And we tried to find particular places in my hometown of Lansing, as well as my father's adopted hometown of Detroit, as to when the specific Baha'i teachers came to Michigan. And what we found in a couple of instances is, one, we found that Hand of the Cause, Martha Root, came to Lansing, Michigan under the specific request of Helen Whitney, who most people might know as Helen Eggleston. And before she was married, she was Helen Whitney, and she made a specific request to, it says, Roy Wilhelm, it said, who was financially supporting Martha through her Northern America travel teaching tour, to come to Lansing. And we found that Martha Root did come to Lansing, and she spent 5 hours with the it says community then, even though there wasn't a local spiritual assembly at the time. It says, and then we found that Martha Root had written in her letter back to, it says, National and the teaching committee, that Lansing was a place for travel teachers to come. And what we found then was that Hand of the Cause Louis Gregory had come to Lansing and spent 3 days there. And we couldn't find any particular records in Lansing's archives involving, it says, Louis Gregory being there. So the next trip we found was that Hand of the Cause Agnes Alexander came to Lansing, and it's possible that she came along with her friend May Maxwell, but we haven't been able to confirm that as of yet. But it turns out that Agnes Alexander and Louis Gregory spoke at the same place, which was then called the Mystic Tea Room in Lansing. And unfortunately, like most historical buildings that you can think of, it's now a parking lot. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the invisible things of history visible, particularly amongst, it says the Baha'i faith, as what we found in Lansing, and what we're finding in Detroit, and what we're finding in Grand Rapids, and what we're finding in Muskegon, of all places, because now we found that Hand of the Cause Corinne True wound up having, in addition to her cottage in Muskegon, she also had a home in Fruitport, and that is still standing. And what we're attempting to do particularly is identifying that for, it says, the recently begun, it says, Corinne True History Center. So we're trying to identify all the places that Corinne True had in Western Michigan. But I suppose the highlight this year would be the centennial celebration of Louis Gregory's trip to Idlewild, Michigan, where he had spent a month traveling and teaching there at the request of W.E.B. Du Bois, who owned property there. And so we found that the invitation had been given, it says, to him to stay for the entire month of August. And he stayed at the Paradise Hotel and he spoke at the Paradise Pavilion. Neither one of those buildings is standing. The only building that's standing, it says, in that area now is the general store. And we're trying to contact, this is the Baldwin History Museum that's nearby, to see whether or not any of the pieces of Baha'i literature that were requested by the proprietors of Idlewild Resort that Louis Gregory talks about in his letter are still in existence. So that's essentially what we're doing as of right now. And it says I'm now attempting to finish. It says it said biographies of Joy and David Earl, who were an interracial couple that were right after. It says Louis and Louisa Gregory, who were married in 1912. It says Joy and David Earl were married in 1933, and they both, it says, believe it or not, spent their earliest days in Lansing, Michigan, speaking about racial amity at the places of worship, and 3 of them are still in existence. And Joy Earl spoke about racial amity before the advent of divine justice was released by The Guardian in 1938.
Thank you,
So
Burton. So
essentially,
in
that's
other words, your focus is really on our interracial
interracial
diversity,
marriages and
right?
racial justice.
So let me come. Thank you, Burton. That was really great. And then that was Michigan. Now I want to share with you some of our, and we're going to close off, and then Cameron is going to give you a quick walk through the museum. Now, in 2028, this is not that far. We are preparing already now. Let me see, about 5-6 years ago, the mayor of Linwood asked me to open up a veterans museum. And I told her nobody runs 2 museums. That was silly. But in the end, I did. I opened up the Veterans Museum there. And when Peter became ill and eventually passed away, I had to retire from that position. But what's happening is that our museum in 2028 is going to have a huge exposure, because what's happening because of that early relationship, and because of my late husband Peter's family being a family of generals since the Civil War, and then a long history. And then when Peter died, I inherited a lot of the archive, the Van Ness archives, you know, like Van Ness Avenue in San Francisco, the first mayor and starting of the first Department of Education. We have a long history through the Van Ness family at the museum. One of the things happened in 1928 is a famous part of American history called the Mission. What is the Mission? The Mission is because Peter's father was in World War I, and we have all this, his military maps and everything, in France. And after he retired, became the Quartermaster General of the United States Army. He then began to gather what you and I call the Gold Star Mothers. And he took them to France, and the government sponsored the boat. And this is all part of the Unity Museum. It's really incredible how we've become part of American history. And so he took him to on a boat to France to visit the graves of the fallen ones, except there were Black mothers and Black parents. And the white boats wouldn't let the Black family members on their boat. So he had to get 2 boats, one Black boat, one white boat. And we have their menus and their signatures and diaries and their passport and the whole history and archives on that very first Gold Star Mother veteran tour. And so then sooner or later, the Gold Star Mothers began to discover our archive. And in 2028, the Gold Star Mother is going to celebrate their centenary of the Gold Star Mothers, because when he came back from the pilgrimage in France, he realized they couldn't do that again. So he took a sketch that we have, and an architectural drawing and said, well, we need something over here because we can't take them to France all the time. And it became known as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, where, you see them lay the wreath on a regular basis. So, and we have the archives for that actually in our museum. So we don't dwell on war, but I want you to know, why did I start the museum? And I will close it with that. I'm born in 1942 in World War II Germany. My youth was then the bombing of my hometown, which looked very much like Kiev or some of those places in Gaza. So I was brought up running down in the middle of the night into the bunker down below, and no food and no clothes and barely survival. Bremerhaven, you will see, it's known because, different reasons. Sometimes we are the aggressors, and then sometimes punishment comes back to those. But my youth was really then brought up about when I was in my early teens, Anne Frank's diary. And I asked my grandmother and my mother, how could you vote for him? And she said, well, Sabina, my grandpa came back from World War I, and he served in Turkey, and Germany was destroyed. And then came this man who promised Volkswagen and Autobahns and working in televisions and radios. And everybody thought that was a great idea. And so they voted for him. Now, the rest is history. But my youth then, we have that famous story of that last piece of bread. There's still today Russian women come into our museum to bring their grandchildren. They know the story of that last piece of bread because I know the story of the last piece of bread. I had a mother and a grandmother, and we were starving, and my grandmother grew vegetables, and she made soup for us, and on Sunday, maybe a little piece of meat in there, maybe, probably not. And we always had a piece of bread. But the question was, who would eat that last piece of bread, because we're all hungry. So the grandmother wouldn't eat the piece of bread. She's got a mother with 3 children. Mother wouldn't eat the piece of bread because she's got a mother and she's got 3 children. The children wouldn't eat the piece of bread. And so we had rules in the house who ate that last piece of bread. We were always hungry. I had to walk to school 4 miles in my shoes halfway through the year. Became too small because I was growing up. We couldn't afford to buy a new pair of shoes. And you try walking with blisters every day to school 4 miles. And so therefore, I know what it's like when you are the product of a war and the after years of the war. And so therefore, I will open it now to Q&A. And I think that's the end of this presentation, how every Unity Museum has its own history, its own purpose, and its own agenda. And here we go, Jennifer, bring it back.
So I'm using a different computer and sometimes it doesn't respond right away. So thank you for your patience. Thank you, Zavina. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to tell you now is time to ask questions and answer questions. Zavina will answer questions, and it helps me to find you if you raise your digital hand, not just your other hand. You can sometimes do like this and I might see you, but if you raise your digital hand, then I can choose you for questions. Does anybody have any questions they wanted to ask tonight? You have to put your video on so that I can select you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yes, my simple question to Zabina is, I live in Vancouver area in Canada. I just want to know what are required to get into this service?
That is such a good question. And I'm anxious for Vancouver to come aboard on this because first of all, we're not that far apart. And Seattle, Vancouver, right? We'll be happy to assist with that. So we start off with a traveling museum, which means it's just a table, the 3-fold, and we go out in the community. And the 3-fold, always the outside 2-fold, and we have, by the way, in the presentation that afterwards you can take a look at what an sample looks like. we should have the community, the history of Vancouver, and then we should integrate also the meditative spiritual history of the community, because we feel is a connection between spirituality and history and evolution of industry and pioneers. I happen to have immigrated to Saskatoon, in Canada, and lived there for a couple of years. And because of that, we have in our museum and are connected with the International Alliance in the UK of Sir Richard St. Barbe Baker, who really was, with the assistance of the Guardian, who started the very first conservationist in the world, and became knighted for that, right? As OBE anyway, and then his history finally was written. So Canada really is an amazing history in the world of preservation, climate change, so you somebody was send the bio and a picture. We'll add you under location, and we start very simplistic, where you go and maybe into a library, you'll bring a presentation on the history of Vancouver, let's say, right? And how it all began, and when did in your case, sometimes we have communication. How did the first Christian community start? We have in our museum when the history of the Children's Museum, which was started by nuns and a minister. And so we go into one common and interfaith history, because often it's the nuns, it's the early pioneers, it's the pilgrims that begin really the heavy lifting, and we want to remember that. And so your bio, and you get a table, the threefold, then you get maybe a gazebo, a street fair. Summer is coming up. There are endless fairs in parks and in recreation areas. Once you have the gazebo, then that's all out for the summer. In the winter, we go back indoors. But the main thing was, once we started to rent and remember, we started inside the Baha'i Center, and I know you have a location in Vancouver. So we then wanted to make sure that we understand that separation between interfaith and the Baha'i Center. But because the Baha'i community, if you look at it from the perspective on the big office in United Nations, and at the big office, we talk about white statements on women and climate and all of that. It's very similar to the work of the Baha'i International Community Office and United Nations. And we go out with that agenda and those talks. And as in Portland, we there work with the local historical societies, and they love working and collaborating with us. And so therefore, it's more the collaboration with other museums, historical societies, and schools. So all schools, they love it when we bring into their history classes, into their world religion courses, right? When we bring in our exhibits. And then once you have a little location, this is where the rubber begins to hit the road, because that's when the universities and colleges sent their students. In the beginning, we just went into the classrooms, and that's how it started. And then once we got our location, our what I call brick and mortar location, this is when the students began to showed up for a whole quarter and studied with us. And we made for them, took their curriculum, made up their courses, the faculty approved it, and they would stay with us. And all of our students got A's, and we have on the average every quarter around 10 students or more. Sometimes we got 30 students, so it depends. And but we have medical students, we have in our cultural anthropology, global world religions, global peace studies. I mean, we are in so many fields that we can be in almost any field. And that's why we open up in Decentraland, where, as Carl shared with us, 22,000 visitors, and they're in avatar shape, even though sooner or later we'll be in face recognition, voice recognition. But right now it's in avatar shape, the visitors. But our screen in the theater there is where we are, have you live, like, and we bring a PowerPoint, and the students will see you in person, and you function just like we do it here. And so therefore we're having our global virtual outreach already established. And we are now locally at the grassroots of the villages, whether it's in Africa, Rwanda, Cameroon. If I told you the story of Cameroon, you would just absolutely fall over backwards, because there was a young man called so what happened is that we started through this human rights consulting, and Marshall, that was his name. Marshall is a 31-year-old, and he also opened up, it was in this little city of 35,000 people in Cameroon, Inakalinga, Cameroon, Night of Baha'u'llah, right? And there's 35,000, and he said, oh, I want to go to the farmer's market, and I want to bring an exhibit, have a Unity Museum at the farmer's market. And I said, well, what's your village? Because we are always right according to the village. He said, oh, my village is all about cows. I said, oh my God, cows. And I said, okay, this is what you do. Bring it to the farmer's market. Cows don't give milk. And he says, Sabina, cows give what? What do you mean cows don't give milk? I said, cows don't give milk. This is what your Unity Museum will talk about. Unless you get a calf and you get a stall and you get food and you get grass, you get a veterinarian, you get up at 5 in the morning, you get a milking stool, you learn how to milk. Only after all of that, cows give milk. And for those of us here who are Christians in the Bible or Baha'is in the Revelation of Baha'u'llah, unless you learn all about that, those revelations, only then, once you understand that, cows will give milk. And so the global village is really about learning about the formation of peace and the process. And we're using United Nations and how we built up in 48. And remember Mildred Malaheda and Dr. Gia Carey, the guy appointed them to be there. I knew Mildred Malaheda. I had lunch and dinner with her. She was in my home and I visited with her. And we were there. My late husband, JT, gave her roses when she was recognized at the SED conference in Orlando. So we have been connected right from the very early days with United Nations and the visions of United Nations globally. And so when I went to China and I met there with the Minister of Religious Affairs, and he wanted to know what the work I did and so on. And I met with a religious minister. He says, oh, Sabina, he said, Sabina, Baha'i faith, Switzerland of religions. I said, can I share that with everybody from here on out, that you as the Minister of Religious Affairs in Beijing called the Baha'i faith Switzerland of all religions? I thought that was pretty darn cool. But so that I'm telling you, the idea, we are so in the center of peace building, of working with gender and working with climate, and the Unity Museum gives you opportunities at your neighborhood to go out there. And we have about 150 people in our speakers bureau that we can bring into your neighborhood. Whether it's Africa, whether it's Europe, whether it's Vancouver, you name him, we've got him. And I'm working with Dr. Stockman. He says, anyone that's willing and able, sure enough, let's bring him in, because we need to bring him in order to get him out, right? And the world is our oyster, and the uniting all of you mankind is our goal. And we're using United Nations in the 30 Articles of COP. And by the way, those human rights, you notice it's Eleanor Roosevelt, launched it in France, not in the United States. But eventually then, when United Nations 48 happened, Mildred Malaheda had the foresight immediately buy an 8-story complex right next to it. And several floors are dedicated to the Baha'i international community. And when we started forming the Uniting Youth for World Peace organization, And in the beginning, we just said, oh, Uniting Peace, Gumbaya, Gumbaya, you know. They said, what are your service projects? And we had to add for Uniting Youth for World Peace, 10 service projects. One of them is to become a certified peace consultant. One of them is to volunteer at our big offices. So it depends on your persuasion, or work with soccer teams around the world and work with Rwanda. I'm just working with the soccer coaches in Guam in order to connect with them in Rwanda. So it doesn't, so coming back to Marshall, eventually, long story short, is Marshall passed away and we inherited Marshall's property. You're not gonna believe it. We inherited a house, 3 guest cottages. We inherited a museum hall. And eventually we ended up owning there 135 acres of farmland, wheatland, peanut farming, fishing property, lakefront property, and the woods has deer and antelopes and pigs. And the mayor of that city became so excited that he came and called called in the capital in Cameroon, the museum association, my city has a museum. And when we opened it, they all came down to the city, and then they invited Elvis to come back to become certified as a museum in the capital of Cameroon. They then allotted from their museum monthly support for the museum. And in that little village, the city council allotted so much support for the museum. And we are now the major museum in that little city of 35,000 people. I am telling you, we are going to train farmers. We're going to train fishermen. We're going to teach them how to operate. We got 25 laptops, and we have a gazebo that holds about 30 students there so that they can learn. And we're going to have little children's, swings and so on. This is becoming a complex that is an SED role model to the Baha'i world that I in Seattle can only dream about. But we inherited it, and it become part of the Unity Museum, UHNI complex. And therefore, we have only just begun. Did that answer your question, honey?
Thank you so much. No, more than what I need, really. I have to just start that. Thank you. Thank you.
You bet. We're ready to go with you.
God bless you, really.
Okay.
Hear, hear.
Does anyone else have a question to ask? Wait a minute. Oh, I can't. 1 second. Okay. Does anyone else have a question to raise their hand or say anything? Sabina, I don't know where you get the energy from. It's just blows my way.
The older I get, the worse I get. People are praying for me to lose my energy. So, usually at 82, they say, oh my God, she's fading. No, I love my life.
It's incredible. Really incredible. Does anyone else have a question or want to ask a question or I don't know.
Remember, it's all starting small. And remember, we just started it with a wall in my living room, right? We weren't even out there. And so if you start small, the idea grows, and we know every step of the way. And wherever you are, somebody in Detroit is asking, oh, I've got a basement, and can I make my basement into a Unity museum? And then we have a traveling museum, and we can bring it out. Of course you can. So it is as innovative, or a garage, and turn it into a museum. It is only limited by your imagination. And we have learned with the Unity Museum concept that is truly it's been so diverse. Somebody said the other day, hey, what if we get an old school bus and turn it into a Unity Museum? And then the kitchen part in the back where you have the kitchen and where you sleep, your couch comes out, but it becomes the conversation room, right? And then they want to travel with a Unity Museum in a school bus. So, go figure, just make it happen.
Nice. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question tonight? Because I think you wanted to have Cameron go into the museum.
Yes, that's it. Because I tell you, with Cameron, we're adding a cooking show. We added a work gallery. We added an art gallery, and Cameron bakes every single day when we're open. Cookies and gets it all ready, and he's become chef baker extraordinaire. And he started to film his baking in the museum. And so Cameron, without any further introduction, he's working on his master's in psychology as we speak, and is going to get ready for his PhD shortly. And so Cameron, take it away and give us the closing summary of the walk and tour. So thank you, and take him into the museum.
Yeah. All right. So let me flip the camera around, and then we can walk around. And so there is where that's I don't know. Can you hear me all right? Or
Yeah, you're fine.
all right. Cool. So that's sort of when people walk up the stairs. Here's where Zabina sits, and there's some local natives. And people really try to feel welcoming here. And so that's sort of like a place to sit down. And there's Sabina's travels. And we get people from all over the world. It's an international city. And here's a museum. So we have a sort of different days trying to do stuff. And there's the principles. And normally when we take people in here, first we will start be like, look, there's some dinos exhibit. And there's the oldest thing in the museum. Wow.
How old is it?
Pretty old.
How old? 500.
It's 500 million years.
500 million years old.
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
And fossils,
And there's
right?
Fossils and the most. So these are sort of little alcoves, and you can see that we have different exhibits. This one is about youth leaders. See, there's Malala. She's all about women's education. And there's Greta. She's all about climate change and parents. It's all their fault. And there's an exhibit about Richard St. Barb Baker. He's planting trees. And then around the walls, there's also other exhibits like Black Important Women. And over there, exhibit about, what do you call it? Pandemics. And this is in the center of the room, we have the train. And that's what people really like to see. Is today, there's different world events that people can think about. Is there's a Mars landing, and then there's the space elevator. What's that?
Go to Lewis and Clark and just walk around real quick. So that's the end, right? Go to
3D printer.
Quick. Yeah, go
I know.
one over.
So that's today, and then you go. There's the train, and then the train goes through that tunnel, and then there's 1800. There's the first steamship, Darwin and the Galapagos. The slaves are freed in the British colonies. Wow, the Oregon Trail is completed.
1844 Morse code.
Oh yeah, the Morse code. And there's the Edison wax cylinder. And people like to say like, oh, how does that work? I don't know. And how does it work? Anyway, so there's a saddle from the colored troops and Lincoln's assassination. And a typewriter. Now we got typewriters. See, there's a typewriter. And here's
But it's
the
electricity in
Lincoln's
Edison is the main thing.
newspaper.
Edison,
What?
Edison
Oh,
is the main
really?
thing. Electricity, right? Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
yeah. But then we talked about electricity. This is the first electric World's Fair in Chicago, 1893.
So
They
it's
built the
basically
International Village.
you're showing us a museum about the history of mankind, but it's not about the history of the Baha'i faith per se.
Right. That's right. We integrated.
No?
We
Yeah,
integrated. You're at various places, Jennifer. We integrate Baha'i history, but it's world history.
Yeah.
It's world history.
This is the opening of the Panama Canal. See? And the NAACP and the Wright brothers. And what does that have to do with history? I mean, this is flight. People didn't even believe that the flight took off, even though they filmed it for like 10 years. People wouldn't believe it. So here's Einstein and radios. What do you mean? Like, what is it with history?
That was world history.
Okay,
Goes
there's the what?
from the Morse
Oh,
code
what about?
to telephone to radio to television.
I mean, yeah, that's just technology, but you can see that it has to do with more than just like, you know, telling some story about, oh, there's Bert Morgan, a black man, and he invented traffic lamp. But then also Gutenberg was hanging around, and Richard St. Barbe Baker started International Tree Foundation, and the Golden Gate Bridge, and Amelia Earhart. And when you focus on a exhibit, you can see that there's more than one thing going on.
It's our children.
The and make history. And I mean, you can like little TVs now. You can get really involved in some stupid little thing. Like here's, for example, everybody transplant surgery and apartheid in Africa, and here's the laptop. And look, there's a real piece of the Berlin Wall. You can see her right there, Sandra Day O'Connor. And there's the, oh, this is cool. This is the old clunker cell phone. Oops. And people used to go to England in a boat, and it was really bumpy. And then,
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Kamran. Okay, I think, Jen, we bored everybody to tears. So if there are any last minute questions, this is your chance, and forever hold
sorry
your
about
peace.
that.
It's okay.
Hey, yeah, Sabina?
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are. So this is
I know,
today now.
Yeah, you were breaking up.
Yeah, good, cool, okay.
Anyway, we are recognized in our exhibit world history. That means including Asia. You didn't see all of that. Native history, right? Black history. So, and then we weave into that whenever we have an opportunity, you know, to, for instance, talk about Sir Richard St. Barbe Baker and the Guardian starting the world, the ITF, International Tree Foundation, and when the Guardian asked Richard St. Barbe Baker to make it an international alliance, and even though he started in Africa, but it came to Palestine, and then eventually we now, our small museum in Seattle, in London, is part of the exhibit in London on behalf of Richard St. Barbe Baker, the fact that we are recognizing the International Tree Foundation. And just last week, we were in Vietnam with Jay Braden, because they're they're planting trees for all the veterans there. In our museum, representation in Vietnam, planting trees for peace, soccer for peace, trees for peace, anything for peace.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear friends, and everyone for coming tonight. So, Zabina, it was really very interesting. It was really very international and really very flexible with your ideas and how you can use those ideas in almost any location with any people. It was really fantastic. Does anybody else have any last minute questions tonight? Not that I end too early. Okay. Then I think we will end for this evening. Oh, there is somebody. You have to put your camera on. Fadia, can you put your camera? Thank you. Okay. Wait a minute. Wait.
Oh, there she is.
I don't have the option.
Yeah,
Okay.
unmute yourself there.
Yeah, yes. Thank you very much, Zabina, for this beautiful, beautiful presentation and the museum. My question is, do you have any cooperation between you and schools to attend such museums?
Absolutely. Every museum automatically is part of the Department of Education. It's a natural marriage between the two, because museums are education, right? And so when we, because you're part of the Unity Museum, and we are registered in Washington, D.C. since 2012, we have an EIN number that you all qualify for. And we're working with United Nations, right? That's why we're consultant for human rights in our local areas, and schools fully understand United Nations and being a consultant for the articles, right, of human rights. So yes, the Department of Education, as soon as they hear the word museum, you're in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It was lovely.
It is easier, I have to tell you, with the schools. In the early days, when you just have what I call the traveling museum, right, or the trunk museum, it's when you go to them. But they send people to you once you have a building to go to, or you rent a little place. As far as renting a little place, let me tell you from experience, rent a little 500 square foot, thousands if you can afford, 1,000 if you can afford it, across a college, university, or high school, if that's all you have in your town, next to a coffee shop. And if you have to be upstairs, that's just fine, because people will come up, but you want the use.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Okay.
question.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this evening. And thank you for your attention. And thank you very much, Sabina, for your time.
Thank you, Jen, for hosting.
Lovely.
Yeah, and all the other people who presented tonight, and also from coming from Rwanda, right?
Yes. I was
Incredible.
so excited that made it in. Obviously, Elvis is in the middle of a storm, and a solar panel and everything is knocked out, and it's so sad. But we'll do something. What we're going to have a conferences soon for our Unity Museum project. And those of you who are interested in finding out more, and our directors and what we're doing, we'll announce it, and then we'll come visit over there.
Okay.
Cyprus, here you go, right, Jen?
Yeah. Oh, I'm just so tired, I tell you. But anyway, it's going to be great. Okay, thank you guys, everybody, for coming tonight. Next week is Gene and Fred North. They're going to tell stories about pioneering to Sicily in the early 1970s. I have been referred to them by Angelina Allen, and she said that they have really exciting stories to tell. So anyone who's interested in that, please come next week. And otherwise, I think I'm going to sign off for tonight. I'm so sorry. Oh,
Great.
okay. Aloha, everybody, and have a lovely
Thank you,
evening.
everybody, for
Good
coming
night.
in today.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone. Goodbye.
Recording